Well, guys, thanks for all your comments and your theories on the drop a C post in the last video we did. And if you haven't seen that video, I'll put a link to it up the top here somewhere. And it's good to see that people had difference of opinion. I'm not a big fan, which was pretty obvious. I think they're a little bit excessive. I think that we're adding too much stuff to the road cycling bike. But some people think that they could be a real advantage. They've used them on mountain bikes, and they think that they could offer something for the road bikes. But my video here today is about the demise of the traditional road cycling bike. So let's roll an intro and let's have a look at the incremental changes that the road bike has taken over the last 10 to 15 years and how it's changed, and how bicycles now between the mountain bike and the gravel bike and the road bike are pretty much coming together and being more similar than they are different. Well, between the 10 and 15 year ago mark, bicycles were pretty much mechanical, and they'll 10 speeds, and they'll carbon frames, carbon wheels, and we had the 23mm tyre, which was pretty common, clinchers or tubulars, and that was what we had. And that sort of type of design, even though there had been some small incremental changes, was pretty much stayed fairly constant for a long time. Now, we may have changed the material. They went from steel to carbon, but the frames were pretty much the same. Drop handlebars and so forth. There were small changes, and sometimes we integrated the handlebars, and then they went out of fashion and all that sort of thing. But they were mechanical, and they were pretty similar. But then we started to get some technology that never been used before in cycling, and that was the electronic gears. And they came in the Di2, and they were really popular with people. Even though they were a bit heavier, people liked them. They liked the feel of them, and they did offer some consistency with changing, especially with the front mechs, which were always the biggest problem on road bikes with the 2x systems. And they became an integral part of the bicycles at that time. Now, I do believe that once they brought that electronic components onto the bike, it changed the whole idea of the way we thought about bikes. We believed that bikes weren't just something you need to pedal. We were adding other engineered or electronic systems to the bike, and we found that those started to grow. And what happened was then we started to see the introduction of disc brakes, and disc brakes came across to road bikes because carbon clinchers were a real problem for the manufacturers, and they used to suffer from overheating on long downhill descents where the carbon would get soft, and the tyre would then, the rim would fail and the tyre would blow off the rim, and then obviously you could have a significant accident. And the manufacturers felt, after doing some different types of research with different materials and so forth, they couldn't really get the products to work the way they wanted at the price point that they wanted to make them for. So that's where disc brakes came in. And disc brakes drove a significant change on the frames and the group sets and how the bikes were made. Now, at first, the disc brakes caused some inherent problems with the frames because the width of the back had been made bigger, but that was an interim size. That actually wasn't the full width that we are at now. And they had problems with the chain lines because of the movement or the shift of the chain stays and the alignment of the chains. And the group sets had to develop some new technology alignments to get them to work properly, but they did get that fixed. And then we started to get disc brakes improved on the bikes. The frames became more inherently disc brakes than rim brakes, and they improved until what we've got today. And this drove another new type of technology integration. So not only did they integrate some of the cables in the frame like we had in about 10 years ago, where the cables were external, they went internal, but integrated them in either a wire into the frame or completely through the stem, because now they were using disc brakes. They didn't need to have cables. Everything could be made either hydraulic or electrical, and they could have quite tight bends and they could be fitted into the stem. But unfortunately, to get those cables from inside the stem to the outside of the stem into the frame, depending on the design, there were some new designs used in that area, which is a very high stress area on the bike, which created some problems which we've seen in modern times. And if you haven't seen that, I've got a few videos out about failures and recalls and so forth related to those type of headsets. Now, disc brakes also created some other problems because the frames had to be made in quite a different way. They had to change the way that they made the frames because the brakes were now not near the main triangle. They were extended to the outer parts of the bike. They were on the fork, or they were on the extended part of the rear frame or the rear triangle. So what this did is this made them having to change the layups of the frames, which made them ride a bit more rigid, a bit more stiffer. So to compensate for that, then we started to get wider tyres on the bikes. And this also drove the tubeless as well, because tubeless in the early days just wasn't that successful because they were just using normal 23, 25 mil clinches, and at the higher pressures, the sealants didn't work so well. So we went to bigger tyres, and the frames were made to fit bigger tyres, and then there was sealant put into tyres, and the tyres started to work a lot better because they were lowering the pressure point of the tyres so the sealants could work more effectively. So now we've got wider tyres, and we've got frames that can take wider tyres, and we've got sealants now that work in the tyres, and we have tubeless setups coming standard on new bikes, and we also have disc brakes, we have integrated systems on the headset, and we also have completely cableless bikes. Now they're either hydraulic or they're electronic cables that are run. Now finally, if you've watched my last video, they're starting now to fit dropper seat posts, and I predict these are actually going to become a bit of a fad, and they're going to be incorporated into bikes. This is going to be the new sales cycle in road racing bikes. But whether they do that or not, we are seeing them fitted to the high-end pro bikes. And when you actually stand back and you look at all of these changes over the last 10 to 15 years, we're really getting closer to what an off-road bike is, either a gravel bike or a mountain bike. Now, a mountain bike has full suspension. That's the only difference. But they've even played around with types of suspensions on road racing bikes. And we're not far off. All we really need to do is put some suspension forks on the front of a road bike. And guess what? We've really got a kind of hybrid mountain bike that can be ridden on the road, because this is the way it's gone. We've got the tubeless technology, we've got disc brakes, we've got a dropper seat post, and okay, we haven't got suspension, but from what we used to see a road bike to be, which was a very more harsher thing to ride and a more intense bike to ride 10 or 15 years ago that was designed for speed. Now we're getting all these things they're talking about. Oh, weight doesn't matter. You need to have comfort because you can ride long. We're getting a more softer road bike. It's kind of like an endurance kind of road bike, but they're calling it a race bike. And this is where I think that we've actually seen a significant change. If we add up all the incremental changes over the last 10 to 15 years, the bikes today are significantly different. And I don't think we've seen such a dramatic change in a 10 or 15 year period than we have all in the bicycle history with so many components. If you buy a brand new road racing bike with all of this new stuff on, it is completely incompatible with a bike that, say, 10 or 15 years ago. You just can't swap anything over. They just don't fit anymore. And so I would say the changes have been significant. So what I grew up, and probably many of you guys out there grew up with as a road racing bike, we don't recognize that today. Now, whether you think that those changes are good or bad, then that's up to you to decide. I personally think that some of those technologies really are not everything that they're cut out to be and what they claim to be, and they don't give the benefits that they really are claiming. They may be some of those, some way towards those marketing claims, but they are not meeting totally those marketing claims. So guys, you tell me what you think about how the road cycle bicycle has changed over the years. Over the last 10 to 15 years, that's where I think we've seen the most changes. Unless someone else who's a lot older and been riding bikes has seen a more significant change, but I can't think of another time when there's been a more significant change across the whole bike. Leave them down below, and let's just share our views in our community. And remember to subscribe down below. Don't be a ninja watcher. And remember to smash that like button, because it pushes the video out into the YouTube world. And I will see you next vid. Cheers.